All right, you got America's national treasure, Forrest, with us. How you doing, Forrest?
I'm doing all right, man. How about yourself?
I'm good, man. I'm good. You know, I'm your old pal Heff here, your Chris Farley impersonator. If we get 5,000 subscribers, I'll whip out the impersonation. We try to mix the cyber news with a little comedy, a little Schadenfreude, and of course, the week's lessons learned from the top cyber news. So we're broadcasting from the Silicon Slopes here in Utah. And if you like us, please subscribe, though. We got our top stories. Our top stories include the Verkada Camera Breach, WeLeakInfo Breach, doing a little use case on that for you, the Microsoft Exchange Server update. This is part dos Equis, part 2. And, we'll wrap it up with a little look at Fin 8, that advanced persistent threat actor, Fin 8. So, DJ, let's play that song like CNC Music Factory, all right? Let's get this party started right. All right, so Forrest and I, every week we try to cover the most prominent data breaches. And sometimes there's a lot going on in the news. To talk about all of them is really difficult. But the one that came up this week that we absolutely need to talk about is Verkada. Forrest, Verkada, Silicon Valley startup. Yeah, man, they rough week.
Yeah, move fast and break stuff indeed. This is pretty rough. Yeah, I don't know if you want to dive into details.
Sure. 150,000 camera feeds have been exposed, and these guys that were involved in this, they consider themselves hacktivists. So that means they're not of the traditional hacker mindset. These guys, their mindset in attacking and doing this was really all about exposure, and they have some unique intentions. It was trying to really show the pervasiveness of video surveillance and the ease of which these systems can be exposed and broken into. But Verkada is a unique company in that they have these cameras and they use a lot of AI-driven interfaces in their cameras. So this object recognition technology, they call it people analytics, and their service relies a lot on the cloud-based video processing. So this allows customers to try to filter the footage based on individual traits, facial traits. So they got breached, 150,000 cameras, and it's kind of like, Forrest, it's like the Jerry Springer show, the footage that got released. Private views of homes, people fighting in hospitals, people fighting in prisons. They even got access to Tesla's factory. 200 and some cameras in Tesla's factory. It's pretty bad stuff.
Yeah, and a little close to home. There was there was a camera in the Bank of Utah IT's break room. Lots of Mountain Dew to be found there. So it's pretty crazy. Just how extensive this was. All stemming back to this super admin account. Really, really painful foot gun for them. Apparently, the hacker was able to find the credentials just online.
That easy,
which is not. Oh man, that's real painful. And yeah, just underscoring kind of the pervasiveness of video surveillance and how these analytics are being used to track people, across different locations, things like that. It's it's kind of a tough spot because, in the past, I've definitely run into many networks where they have their camera system exposed to the internet, and typically in those cases, I've recommended that they go with a company that does kind of that authorization for them, so that it's not just directly exposed to the internet. They have some kind of broker that is doing the authorization for who's allowed to view those camera feeds, so that they don't just have something exposed to the internet. But this really kind of underscores that not all of these camera companies are going to be equal. I think they're definitely going to be tightening things up a lot following this, but that's a bit of egg on the face, and it's closing the barn door after the cows are already out.
My gosh. And Forrest, Verkada, Silicon Valley startup, they're advertising themselves as PCI, no, GDPR compliant, HIPAA compliant, and they're going out of their way to try to push that and push their product line in hospitals. And here it is exposing all these patients' records, all this video footage. It's just some nasty stuff. The Hacker Collective, they call themselves jokingly, they call themselves APT 69420, which is kind of funny in that sense. But what's not funny is all of the stuff that got exposed, man. You just can't have that in this day and age. Verkada really has to get their act together, and luckily they are investigating and they're trying to figure it all out. But you cannot have this type of breach in this day and age. And you think about all the state secrets that Tesla has and how they lay out their factory and how they design it, and who knows what some of the images were on some of those 220 cameras just in Tesla's factory. Not kidding, all of the hospitals and all of the jail cells and any paperwork that got exposed and any computer screens that were showed. So nasty stuff. We do need to move on, though. There are other breaches in the news, and of course, the Coors Light, the Molson Brewery got breached. This is probably one of the largest, biggest breweries in the country, and we don't have a lot of details yet on how the breach actually happened and what the impact was, but we do know that their production line was briefly knocked offline. They were trying to get it back online. But Forrest, I mean, lesson learned here, when hacking disrupts any sort of production line, that's a big problem. And they really need to re-examine some of their controls that go to the outside world. So any stuff that's remote exposure that allowed these hackers to get in, that stuff has to be re-examined.
Yeah, it's interesting how little detail there is currently. I mean, you basically just have the SEC filing saying that, they had a cybersecurity incident and we've got top minds working on it, kind of thing. It's funny, there's always got to be some kind of flavor text for reassurance there. It's even in these kind of filings.
So there are other breaches in the news. There are other hacks in the news. We don't have time always to go over every single breach, every single HIPAA violation, every single GDPR, but we do try to cover some of the bigger stories. Three stories you should probably need to be aware of. A Utah company that stored passport scans on unsecured server, they got popped this past week. It's company's called Premier Diagnostics. 50,000 customers had their scans of their passports exposed, insurance ID cards, driver's licenses, unbelievable stuff. So, this is a lesson learned here, right? Sensitive PII, it's got to have strong protections. It's got to have your controls in place to protect that data from being exposed. And you got to have those AWS databases under control. So anything in the cloud, it's got to have multiple security checks on it. University of Texas at El Paso, the entire network had to be shut down. They had a pretty nasty, significant cyber attack, and they were trying to get their faculty and their students back online. They were all forced to use Blackboard, which is an e-learning program. Forced. I like that, Forrest. College kid that I am, forced to use Blackboard. But yeah, nasty stuff. And then the other issue that came up this past week was an Arizona optometrist. These guys, they had a ransomware attack back in January, and we're just now kind of finding out about it. 100,000 patients, all of the scheduling stuff was encrypted, all their billing software was encrypted. Anything that they had with names, dates of birth, social security numbers, addresses, all that stuff got caught up in this ransomware breach. So that's about as deep as we're going to go on some of these stories. But a lot of stuff in the news, and it's always important. There's lessons learned from every single story in the news. So let's get right into the top stories. All right, WeLeakInfo. Forrest, have you heard of these guys? Have you ever used WeLeakInfo?
I haven't. No. That's a gray area that I won't touch with a 10-foot pole.
My gosh, these guys, WeLeakInfo is an interesting story. So we actually are going to do a little use case on this right now because we had one of our email addresses here at work get caught up in this breach. But it's one of the largest services that you can buy hacked passwords. And it's really unique in that it's searchable. You can basically look through about 10,000 data breaches. There's about 12 billion indexed records, names, email addresses, phone numbers. But Forrest, what's really wicked about WeLeakInfo and this breach is for a small fee, you could enter any email address you wanted, and you can search for and see every password associated with that email address if it was ever in a previous breach. But you can also go on the reverse, and you can type in a password like password123 and then see every email address that was associated with it. Now, luckily, this site's been shut down by the FBI a long time ago. About over a year ago, this site was shut down. But there's more to the story.
Yeah, it was back in January 2020 when it was shut down. So it's just a little over a year, and I think that's probably why we're seeing this story pop up now. Is the domain registration that they had for it had lapsed. So then somebody comes in and decides that they want that domain and see what they can try and get after the fact. And this WeLeakInfo accepted payments for access these breaches, and they accepted, I believe, like PayPal, Bitcoin, and Stripe payments for credit cards. And it turns out that the Stripe account was still somehow active. So they were able to go through and do a reset, password reset on the account because they owned the domain. They could receive the email for it and get back into that Stripe account and get all the account information that way. So pretty nasty stuff. It's really interesting that the service initially was just run by a couple of 22-year-old kids. I think one was in Netherlands and the other in Ireland or something. But just the whole story from start to finish is pretty nutty.
Now imagine like you're at the FBI and you're like, oh, we did such a great job. We seized this domain. We got it, like a year and a half ago. And then all of a sudden somebody forgets to, we never, I know what it was, Forrest. We never got that. We never renewed that domain. And then some guy comes in behind them and says, yeah, I'm going to buy the domain. I'm going to get access. I'm going to try to get the password for the Stripe account. And then you start using this. It's absolutely, my opinion, brilliant. And it's an unfortunate situation for all those that have their information involved in it. But my gosh, man, just you think maybe they'll have a department. I think, Forrest, this is what I think. I think the FBI will come up with their own department for Department of Renewing Seized Domains. I just think it's a job there.
Of loose ends.
Yeah. Department of Loose Ends at the FBI. This is the one that they're going to do. But we do love our law enforcement partners, but it's an unfortunate situation.
Yeah, it's an easy mistake to make. I mean, how many accounts do you have left inactive from, who knows how far back, or it's very, very easy mistake to make. One of those things that's, easy checkbox to miss.
So, Forrest, what do you think we switch topics for a minute and we do a little bit of as the cyber world burns, right? Because the cyber world's on fire right now. The era, Forrest, the era of the mega hack. That's what the news media is calling it.
Yeah, it's been an exhausting couple of months, really. But man, I'm just
I know you're tired.
This exchange hack is just. But it's brutal.
Forrest, I mean, it's like we had the SolarWinds thing happening back in December, and then we've got to handle cases for the 0365 breach, and then that follows it up by the Excellion breach, and now we're handling cases here in Utah for the Exchange server breach, and of course, I'm sure the audience wants to know, well, how does this soap opera end? And it's not pretty. I could tell you for some of our clients, it's some nasty stuff out there, guys. And it's so sad. I feel like, Forrest, sometimes I feel like when we're on the phone call with our clients, we're like a doctor giving them the bad news that they have cancer or something. That's how bad the situation is for some of our clients out there.
Yeah, it's never an easy conversation to get somebody on the line and say, look, here's all the stuff that I'm seeing. You really need to get some incident response going here. it's the bearer of bad news. Nobody wants to be the one to have to deliver that, but
no. But there is some good news out of this story, and the good news is that as an industry, we're making progress on solving all of the exposed breaches, all the Exchange servers out there that are exposed. The numbers are going down. I don't know if you read this. I read this article about the cyber insurance company at Bay, and they said 1 in 190 of their businesses are being impacted by the Exchange server breach. Something like mostly small to medium-sized businesses are being hit more than the bigger players. The enterprise folks have got their stuff patched. They're under control. It's these smaller players that really need the love and the help.
Yeah. It was some of the numbers that I was seeing, and these are a few days out of date. As of the 14th, I think that there were approximately 62,000 Exchange servers that were still potentially vulnerable to this. And then they had done some more number crunching of the IPs that they saw with web shells on them. I believe they had seen about 12,861 unique IPs that had an active web shell on them.
Whoa.
And 22,731 shells. So that means that some of these machines have multiple web shells on them at a given time. So I mean, they're just getting triple teamed in some cases by these threat actors, and so it's I mean, at this point, if your Exchange hasn't, if you haven't patched your Exchange, just nuke it from orbit. Like you
It's
just
too late.
need to go from backups, and it's scorched earth at this point. You just need to start from a known good baseline and try and recover that way.
So let's give the folks at home, let's give them the update on the story. The story goes, there are two parts here. As the cyber world burns, the first part is there's a lot of research being published out there, especially from FireEye. We'll include the link to the FireEye report, the little malware that could. I love that title of their report. But, they looked into Hafnium. We mentioned Hafnium in our last episode. They are part of the APTs that are behind this Exchange server breach. That's just one part of the story. But the tools that Hafnium uses are pretty remarkable. These tools aren't new stuff for us. These things have been around since like 2012. It's a tool called China Chappa. The Chappa, China Chappa. I love saying it, man. It's a web shell. It's really small. I mean, it's like 4 kilobytes in size. It's not new. I mentioned it's been around, a heck of a long time. But Hafnium was using this web shell to try to remote control these web servers. And the web shell has two parts. There's a client part, which is the executable file, and then there's a receiver or server part. And what they're able to do is pretty remarkable. A lot of command and control features, password brute force options, code obfuscation, file and DB management. It even has a GUI to it. But you fast forward to today, Forrest. And what's interesting about this stuff is Hafnium is being used to execute this web shell stuff, this attack on all these businesses. It's pretty fascinating. It's like it's such a small tool, 4 kilobytes, and that it's so powerful in what it's able to execute.
Yeah. I mean, back when my pen test days, the most reverse shells do not take a whole lot. You can stuff it into less than a couple K in some instances, depending on the encoding. And but yeah, I mean, just the number of groups that have started to piggyback on this is just nuts. I mean, I was going through a list. We've got, you mentioned Hafnium. There's Tick, Lucky Mouse, Calypso, WebSick, WinNTI, Tonto, Microscene. I mean, it's just blowing up, and just the sheer scale of the effects. I mean, it's global at this point, and it's hitting some pretty big organizations. Like you got the European Banking Authority, you've got the Norwegian Parliament, you've got a bunch of East Asian IT services, Central Asia, Middle East, government orgs in Africa. Like it's hard to overstate how widespread this is.
And it's also hard to understate how challenging it is to talk to the clients and talk to people about how you find this in your environment. You've got all this active traffic potentially beaking it out. And then the other follow-up piece to that is once you get that traffic under control, then you have to start looking at, okay, you've closed the door to the hackers, but are they still in your environment, and have they planted any sort of backdoor, any sort of malware? So then we have this follow-up piece of this breach that makes it really challenging.
Yeah, yeah, and I really do wonder how much of this, is, is there persistence that's just waiting dormant, and that's when, when you have this level of compromise that, a lot of people will try and take the approach of, oh, well, I can just clean the malware up and, block off these ports and I'll be good. And it's, you can't guarantee that there isn't something that, is just going to fire up a month from now, or who knows how long. It's you're best going from a clean slate, known good baseline.
All right, Forrest, there's two parts to this Exchange server update. And we mentioned the first part, Hafnium, China Chappa, but we also got to talk about the second part, which is how did so many groups have the ability to execute on this Exchange server flaw so quickly? And that's the question that researchers are trying to ask right now. Why were there so many different, at minimum, there's 12 APTs that just seem to right away be able to execute on these 4 CVEs, these 4 flaws, and they were able to take action. So what's going on right now behind the scenes is Microsoft's trying to figure out how did all of these groups basically obtain a proof of concept, a POC attack code, and the company distributed that attack code to their partners back on February 23rd. And there's about 80 or so of these security partners that belong to the MAP program, which is the Microsoft Active Protections Program. These are security partners that will utilize the code, will try to help develop the code, will help try to take action with the code and make their Microsoft products even stronger as part of their product line as well. So these 80 or so security partners are being investigated, and the answer is, how did they know? Was the code leaked? There's a lot of theories out there, Forrest, and the plausible theories come down to 3. I'll tell you what those 3 theories are, but I want to hear your opinion first, Forrest, on how you think what's going on.
Yeah, it was interesting that they noted 4 new groups started utilizing the vulnerabilities within 24 hours of the patches being released. Now,
Incredible.
Naturally, yeah, you can reverse engineer based off of what binaries you're getting from the patches and try and figure it out that way. But 4 different groups, all within a 24-hour period. And some of them just within hours of the patch. So probably not the source there. Maybe there's some type of collusion. Maybe it's up for sale. Maybe one of the orgs that is part of that program may have a mole, or just who knows. Maybe they just have their own malware problem that they're still needing to root out. There's any number of ways that this could have come about.
Yeah, and that's the thing that security researchers, including Microsoft, are trying to figure out. The different plausible theories that could explain why so many APTs were able to have this code so quickly and use the exploit. So the one theory is the exploit was for sale on the underground forums, on the black market, on the dark web. Another theory is something you mentioned. Maybe the groups, when they created the exploit, they shared it with other groups, and we don't know the reasons why. And then a third theory that exists are all the various groups are organized by one entity, and that's who provided the exploit to all the different groups. They just had it so quick, Forrest. It's just unreal how much they were able to take advantage of the situation. This thing just exploded. You talk about January 6th, the security researchers find these 4 flaws, but we're going all the way back to October of the last year and September of the last year trying to figure it out. That's how long ago we have to do our research. So fascinating stuff, guys, as the cyber world burns. All right, we should talk about the next thing on this list, and that is Fin 8. Fin 8 back in the news. For some of you, this may be the first time you're ever hearing of Fin 8. There's a whole line of advanced persistent threat actors called in the Fin family. These guys are something special. The Fin family is huge. There's Fin 5, Fin 11, Fin 8, Fin 7. I know I've had experience working in past lives with these Fin threat actors. The first documented Fin 8 is the one we're talking about today. Back in 2016, FireEye identified these guys. What's interesting about Fin 8 and Fin 5 and Fin 6 and all these guys is they primarily go after financial transactions. So a lot of point of sale stuff is what they primarily target. And what's really interesting, especially about Fin 8, is they will lay low, they will sit and they will wait. And then they will be very active for a while, and then they go back to waiting and sitting. It's almost like a panther forest or a lion in the forest, just waiting for its next meal. That's the best way I could describe the Fin family of threat actors.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, they are taking an approach where they're not just going to go for a spray and pray, kind of, just see what they can hit. It seems to be very refined. It's like they'll go through a cycle of exploitation, hide in the shadows again, and try and find ways to refine their techniques, make tweaks to the malware and just make it run better, going for, file lists or, whatever improvements they can to try and up their game for the next iteration. It's very interesting, the approach that they take.
Yeah, and these guys, the Fin family, especially Fin 8, what they're primarily doing is they're targeting North American companies. They're really going after the insurance companies, the retail companies, the chemical industry, and these guys, they love to refine their tools. And Forrest mentioned this. They refine their tools, they refine their tactics, they use them, and then they go back into hiding again. And it's very important that you understand how this malware works. It's very dangerous stuff. It's called Bad Hatch, and that's the name for it. We obviously don't have a lot of time to go into how it works, but we'll put up a little image on the screen here that shows you their collection process. But there's 3 different variants of this backdoor, and since April of 2020, these 3 variants have been found in the wild. The researchers said that we've read and that we understand is that Bad Hatch, it abuses a legitimate service, and it basically takes your DLL file and it executes it with a PowerShell script to get into your environment. A lot of persistence, a lot of privilege escalation out there, and that's all done through the script and executed then on you, the user. So what's also unique about Bad Hatch, if I recall, there's 2 different evasion techniques, and that's what makes it dangerous, because in the second evasion technique, it will try to pass off any communication with the command and control, with the C2 stuff, and then it will try to masquerade itself as legitimate traffic. So it's nasty stuff. It's got a lot of brilliant code to it that makes it very dangerous out there.
Yeah. The 2 biggest takeaways from this that I had were, the initial access vector, which, surprise, is phishing.
Spear phishing,
albeit spear phishing, but still, it's gotta exercise that healthy sense of paranoia in that regard. And 2, these payment systems not being fully isolated from the rest of the network. I mean, if somebody gets phished in your company, there shouldn't be any means of communication between your CDE and the rest of your environment. So just making sure that you actually have those controls in place. Very, very important.
Yeah. And you're going to hear a lot more about the Fin family as we continue on our journey together. But this is Fin 8, and it's definitely worth researching, diving into, understanding all their TTPs. Tactics, techniques, and procedures. I'm going to get it out, Forrest. I haven't had enough coffee yet this morning. Yeah, Forrest. All right, so here we go, Forrest. Mystery grab bag, odds and ends. This is the time of the show. This is the time of the show where we how do I say this? We reach into our cyber internet grab bag and we pull out just some different stories that you may not have heard about. And these are things that we find interesting because it's new stuff. It's not always about the breaches or the hacks or the threat actors. Sometimes we like to talk about things that just seem so out there and so wild. So here's the spaghetti. Dutch police, they're now posting friendly warnings on hacker forums. And what they're doing, Forrest, I love this idea. I was so excited. This was like Christmas for me hearing about this story. But the Dutch people, they're putting out these notifications and they say, hey, everyone makes mistakes. We are waiting for yours. We'll have our editor put up a copy of the image of what it looks like. But if you're in the Netherlands and you're a bad guy and you're using any sort of hardware, cloud, any infrastructure in their world, they're going to make sure you know about it.
Yeah, the PSYOP aspect of it is a pretty interesting approach because, I mean, there is a good measure of truth to it. I mean, a lot of these big busts of these darknet criminals are largely due to operational security failures. So, I mean, take for example like Lulsec, Cebu, however you pronounce it. He got popped because he connected to IRC once without using Tor, and because of that, they were able to track him down, get him to flip, and they took down everybody else. So it's this domino effect. But yeah, largely it's not the technology that's failing most of the time. It's usually somebody slipping up even just once. So I think that's a very powerful kind of message that may get some people to reconsider. And it's like, especially where you're in kind of this, it's offensive, and then you have the counter offensive of the people trying to take down the groups. It's, good defense is your problem. The attacker really only needs to succeed once.
Right.
But that's the same for the people that are attacking the attackers, right? So,
yeah. We have to be right. We have to be right 100% of the time. We always have to be on our game, but the hackers just have to be right one time. And once they're in your environment, they're in. It's too late at this point, So yeah, I love that. It's such a brilliant way to go on the offensive and show these folks if you're going to try to activate and operate in our country in the Netherlands. We're not going to tolerate it, and we just want you to know you're on blast right now to not come here. You're not welcome here. All right, we also need to talk about this. This story, I deem this as like one of the biggest stories of the year, but nobody seems to talk about it because you can prevent it. And the story is about phishing sites, and what they're able to do now is detect virtual machines to bypass detection. They're able to do it through, basically phishing sites are using JavaScript, and they're doing the JavaScript to evade detection. So they can detect the size of your virtual machine, the screen size of your virtual machine, along with some other things, and then execute a WebGL API to then take advantage of it. So the challenge is a lot of us use virtual machines thinking that we're protected. We're protected from phishing attacks. But the reality is now, because of this new method, we're not. But there is good news. There is hope, Forrest. Hope is a good thing in our world. There is hope to, there is code that you can execute to try to block the phishing detection of your virtual machine. So
it's an arms race for sure. I mean, you see a lot of this sort of stuff in fingerprinting attempts to fingerprint things, and a lot of malware analysts and threat hunters will use either VMs or things like that, headless browsers to see what's happening when somebody goes to one of these phishing sites. And so it's just kind of this arms race between being able to detect these virtual environments so that you can keep your stuff obfuscated, and then the hunters trying to find a way to go about thwarting that fingerprinting. It's just a huge back and forth that is real interesting. I think the biggest thing is phishing is very much in some regards a solved problem. I mean, you look at standards like U2F and using these hardware security keys that are accepting the domain itself as part of the authentication process. And I just think that we're going to see a lot of this stuff really drop off a cliff over the next, I don't know, 10 years or so, as we start to make that a lot more of the normal. I think having hardware security keys is going to become a lot more prevalent.
And I would challenge that comment for us. Let's say it's a solved problem, but it's capable of being solved. And whether or not we execute on that as an industry, that's where the challenge comes into play, because we're just not executing on it for a variety of reasons. Too long of a story to go into here, but it's capable of being solved, and there's a lot of potential out there with the hardware keys that can make that happen. So it'll be good to see how this evolves in the next year. But again, the virtual machines, interesting stuff. So look, we got two more stories to talk about, and then we'll wrap this sucker up. But the story that caught my eye too, Forrest, is NIST. They put out this update, special publication 853, regarding phishing literacy training and awareness. And the reason why I thought it was important is because so many organizations, they do phishing training, but I always question the effectiveness of it, Forrest. I'm like, hey, you're going out there and you're spending all this effort to do phishing campaigns against your employees. And yeah, you're seeing some of the metrics that you want to see, low click-through rates. But then I always ask myself, is it really effective the way you're doing it? Are you really phishing for the right information is what I'm trying to get at, I guess.
Yeah. It's I like to see that NIST is going through and revising some of these standards. They're getting a lot more in touch with real world practices. I think for a long time people had a huge beef with some of the approaches that they would take because they were out of touch. For example, like the password stuff, where now they aren't recommending these regularly rotating passwords, because it ultimately users end up subverting that by creating easy to remember and easy to iterate passwords. So it just wound up being one of these shooting themselves in the foot kind of thing. And so I do like to see where they're just like, we're gonna as far as phishing standards, don't announce it. Just keep it keep it on the level, because that's going to better reflect what somebody is going to see in the real world. If you say, oh, hey, by the way, you're going to get in a car accident today, so watch out, then that somebody's going to be driving a lot more cautiously, as opposed to just going about business as usual. So I'm glad to see that they are taking this approach. One thing that I would like to see is more kind of perpetual kind of phish reporting programs, where employees are kind of have this incentive to
gamification.
Be constantly vigilant. Whether it's spiffs or a leaderboard or what have you. Trying to crown most reported emails or highest accuracy of reported emails, or something along those lines, where it's you're getting people to think more about what it is that's coming into their inbox, because it is a super effective initial access method for sure.
Yeah, that gamification piece where you're pitting departments against other departments is fantastic. What I do want to get back to this NIST publication though, because not giving notice, a lot of companies do that. Hey, next week, guys, we're sending out phishing emails to all the employees. It's like, why did you just do that? You just warned everybody to be on the lookout for a phishing email. But then, Forrest, NIST went a little bit deeper, and they said you can't make these phishing campaigns always one-dimensional. It's not always about clicking the link. There's a bigger story going on there, folks, and you need to manage and massage your phishing campaigns to your environment. And I love that fact. Most people, they when they run these phishing campaigns, they don't know who their threat actors are, and they just simply put out a link. But being able to really just track down, are you being hit with credential harvesting attacks? Are you being hit with malicious attachments? Is your environment primarily being hit with macros, malicious macros? That's how detailed your phishing campaigns have to get. And then on top of all that, NIST went a little bit further and a little bit deeper, because they talked about crafting highly sophisticated spear phishing campaigns, and you got to have that as part of your stuff and their recommendations. So good stuff. It's excellent information. It's the way the industry should be moving forward. And it's cool stuff. We have one final story to talk about today, and that is Grindr in the news. $10 million fine. Whoa, that's a lot of income for a company like Grindr to have to pay up. Grave was the commentary. Grave GDPR violations by the Norwegian Data Privacy Authority. And just think, this happened in the EU, Forrest. It's not just Norwegian that's probably looking at these Grindr guys, but it's Germany, it's all these other countries in the EU. They could potentially be looking at individual fines from each one of these EU countries if they don't get their act together.
Yeah, and it makes me happy to see this enforcement actually taking place. I'm a huge fan of data privacy laws, and I would love to see something like California's CCPA. I would like to see those sort of data protection standards become implemented nationwide rather than just individual one-offs. I think the GDPR is excellent, and I'm glad to see that this legislation has some teeth to back it up, some enforcement that's gonna keep companies a little bit more honest in how they're handling this data.
What caught my eye on this story, and the reason why we're bringing it up, is because when you install an app on your phone, Forrest, they make you sign away your life. They make you agree. Like, you can't get around that. You want to use an app in the United States, for example, you have to agree to their terms. But the Norwegians are saying, hey, you're not allowed to just do that. You can't just give a blanket policy for privacy and make everyone accept it. You have to give people the option. And the Norwegian Data Privacy Authority, Protection Authority, is saying, you didn't give people the option to opt out or have a separate policy to withhold consent of your information and sharing your data with third policies, which I would love. I'd love to see that globally for every app. You have two options. You can accept our privacy and share your data, or you can do part two, which is accept it, but withhold consent for certain things. I'd love that. I would love to see more of that happen.
Yeah, I would think, or I would at least hope that, Grindr of all companies would know a thing or two about consent, but...
Right, there you go. Oh, and on that note, Forrest, I think we got to wrap this up. Hey, we love you joining us, guys. We hope you join us. We're every 2 weeks. We try to put together a summary, a synopsis of the top stories. Please subscribe. Please like us. We're on all the major platforms. If we hit 5,000 subscribers, I'll whip out my Chris Farley impersonation. And Forrest, you got any impersonations you can roll out for us?
Oh boy, deer in headlights.
You got to work on that deer in headlights impression. People love that stuff. All right. Hey, thanks for joining us, folks. Have a great rest of your week.